Hey, gorgeous, and welcome to this episode of the Magnetic Woman Show. I'm your host, Lauren Joyce, and I am so excited today to talk about something that I've been thinking about honestly for a long time now. And I feel like it's really kind of come to head, and that is ditching this idea of Christ consciousness and moving into you can call it Magdalene consciousness, but really it's Magdalene embodiment. So, if you've been here for any length of time, chances are you already know my story, right? You know that I grew up Catholic, went through 10 years of Catholic school, left the church, have been deconstructing religion for over a decade now, and through that deconstruction was led to Mary Magdalene, and now I am a Magdalene priestess, a Magdalene devotee, I'm a witch, would also consider myself a mystic, and through all of that, through deconstructing religion, through connecting to Mary Magdalene, through becoming a Magdalene priestess, I've seen a lot of things in like the New Age spiritual space and even in the Magdalene space, which still reduces Mary Magdalene to either like a part of a whole or a supporting character, right? And we just need to face facts here. The only reason why there is an entire religion devoted to Jesus is because of patriarchy. The only reason that the Abrahamic religions are devoted to men is because of patriarchy. It is not because there were no female prophets, mystics, spiritual leaders. There were, but because of patriarchy and because of the hierarchy, the hierarchical structure in ancient empires, not only were those women not celebrated, revered, seen for holding those positions, but throughout history, those women would have been killed, cast out. And honestly, this is why I've been doing a lot of my current spiritual work, spiritual development, if you will, has been around seeing female Catholic saints as part of my spiritual ancestry because these women, these mystics, these priestesses, in order to live out this spiritual path of devotion that they knew deep down they were meant for, the only option available to them usually, was the Catholic Church. It was the convent. And that was a way to hide, like to be on a path of spiritual devotion, to allow their mystic and spiritual gifts to come through in a structure that was protected by the patriarchy, right? So when we go back to the beginning of Christianity, there are a few things that we have to remember. First, foremost, most importantly, now I believe, pause, I believe Jesus was a prophet and a mystic. Yes, absolutely. He did not come to start a religion. No, he came to push back against the evils of the Roman Empire. And let us not forget Jesus was Jewish. Okay, so he and his followers were Jewish. His initial followers were Jewish. This was meant to be a Jewish sect that was very radical, socially radical, politically radical, financially radical, right? Because it's telling the poorest among us are have an easier chance of getting into heaven than a wealthy man. So Jesus was a political rebel. He was socially a rebel, believing in equality for all, at a time when the Roman Empire and the power structure, the hierarchy of the Roman Empire was all male, and it was very much a few at the top that then went down to slaves and women below that. Okay. And so, what we see with a lot of, again, stuff with New Age spirituality and even with Magdalene, we constantly hear this term like Christ consciousness, Christ consciousness, Christ consciousness. And it's been pissing me off. First of all, I've never really resonated with it. And I think it's because for me, after leaving the church and deconstructing religion, I really don't want anything to do with anything that sounds like remotely religious. And over the last like 4 or 5 years, a lot of my personal development has been around decentering men, centering myself, centering the feminine, looking at internalized and like institutional patriarchy and misogyny. So anything that defaults male, I'm against. Like, let's just call a spade a spade. I'm a misandrist at this point. Okay. Like, I am very much a radical feminist. People would label me probably bitter and angry, and absolutely you can call me a misandrist. Okay. So, this idea that it's Christ consciousness, right? That the consciousness of like oneness, love over fear is attributed to Christ and only Christ pisses me off. Because not only was Mary Magdalene his equal, in my opinion, and this is a radical belief and perspective, and honestly, it's not really corroborated historically. I believe it was Mary Magdalene who was the spiritual leader. And for the time period in the Roman Empire, these spiritual truths that she was brought here to deliver would only be accepted through a male mouthpiece. Do I believe that Mary Magdalene and Jesus were partners, lovers, married? Absolutely. I do not see Mary Magdalene as half of a whole. And again, that's often what she gets reduced down to. She gets reduced down to this like half of a whole, the beloved energy. And it, to me, it dilutes the fact that she continued to preach, priestess, whatever you want to call it, for longer than Jesus was alive. She went on for decades, a minimum of 3 decades after the crucifixion, being a spiritual leader, much longer than him. And the core part of Christianity, Catholicism, is the resurrection. That story would not have happened without her. She was the only one to witness the resurrection. So to again, like kind of dilute her into this like half of a whole feels misogynistic. So this idea of like we're oh Christ consciousness is resurrecting. I'm like gross. What's resurrecting is the Magdalene embodiment. What's resurrecting is the sacred feminine, and it has nothing to do with Jesus. Is that the spiritual like truths that he was delivering? Yes, but where was he getting it from? Not God the Father, that's for damn sure. So for me, and again, this is like I know that it can sound like a little bit radical, a little bit weird, a little bit out there. And this is why I become hesitant to share things like this. But if we really sit with it, if you really sit with, well, why is it called Christ consciousness? Well, because of Jesus. Okay, well, why was it Jesus and not Mary Magdalene? The only answer is patriarchy. The only answer. Because the story of the Christian church like stops at the resurrection. It was never meant to. If we look at it from Mary Magdalene's perspective, it is here she is priestessing with a male counterpart who dies. She witnesses the resurrection and she continues on to priestess, to lead, to convert. So when we strip away patriarchy, misogyny, being male centered, and we focus on women, the feminine, the sacred feminine, that story, that arc has a very different arc, right? Because again, the story of Christianity, it ends with the resurrection, which is why I think we really struggle with the death and rebirth process internally because the religious like and cultural norm spirituality everything kind of like ends at death. Like yes, Jesus resurrected, but that's like that story ended, right? Like that storyline ended. But if we were to be focused on the feminine and the death and resurrection was just a part of the story and the story continues after, we would have a completely different relationship to the death and rebirth process internally, externally. We would have a completely different relationship to the feminine. The storyline wasn't that he died and resurrected. The storyline was that the feminine led, witnessed this, and continued to lead. And so I want to welcome you, invite you into really challenging everything that you were ever taught where a man is at the center of it. Everything you were ever taught by men, everything, every thought, like thought process, philosophy, structure that was created by a man, I want you to question it. I did an entire podcast episode around ditching the maiden mother crone because that was popularized by a man. It was essentially invented by a man. The triple goddesses throughout history were not maiden mother crones. They were triple goddesses of other things, usually like fertility and death. It was not a life, they were not triple goddesses of the a life cycle. They were triple goddesses of aspects of women. The idea that the triple goddess is this like life cycle of a woman was created and popularized by a man who, by the way, was not a historian or a sociologist or an archaeologist. He was a poet. But we just take these things. So it's like, again, the only reason why Christianity is centered, like the religion of this spiritual truth is centered around Jesus is because of patriarchy. And what happened was the Roman Empire, and I've said this in so many podcasts, but the Roman Empire, what did it do? It just took this new spiritual wave and was like, you know what? We're going to make this the religion of the entire empire, but they did it not out of benevolence, not out of the goodness of their heart. They did it as a mechanism of control and oppression and to maintain the control and oppression of slaves, of women, especially. That's why they cut out any gospel that venerated women, that saw women as teachers and leaders. And so when I think of, to me, it's kind of, there's like three camps, right? There's Christianity, and of course you have like all different kind of camps in there, and you have the nut jobs of Christian nationalists and evangelicals. Like, don't even get me started. You have New Age spirituality, which in a lot of ways is patriarchal and misogynistic and patriarchal religious framework placed on like this New Age spirituality. This idea of New Age spirituality, but it's typically just kind of takes existing structures in patriarchal religion and places them onto like a New Age spin, Christ consciousness. And then you have the camp that I'm in, the sacred feminine. The sacred feminine that, quite frankly, in order for us to really be in the sacred feminine, we have to deconstruct and decenter men and the masculine in spirituality. I would be completely content if I never taught any women about any male figures when it comes to spirituality. And honestly, that's why I created Mystics, Harlots, and Heretics. We're not studying men. We've heard enough from men. We have heard enough of their spiritual perspectives. We've heard enough of their writings. We've heard enough of their opinions. We've heard enough. Mystics, Harlots, and Heretics is truly about connecting to this sacred feminine wisdom that was oppressed, suppressed, forgotten, and hidden. It centers women, and it centers women in a way that it turns everything that you were taught and conditioned to believe on its head. In Mystics, Harlots, and Heretics, we're like F you to Christ consciousness. We believe in Magdalene embodiment. Period and full stop. We see her as the spiritual leader that she was, not half of a whole. She was never a half of a whole. She was always the fucking thing. It's just like when we talk about how, as women, our gateway to our power is our sexuality and pleasure. Why else would the patriarchy spend so much time convincing us that that was wrong, bad, dirty, sinful? Like, it is so powerful that it took so much conditioning and brainwashing to make us believe that it was morally wrong. Like, why would they want so badly to make us believe it was morally wrong? Well, clearly it holds so much power. The same thing is true for Mary Magdalene. Why would they want us to believe that she was a prostitute? Then, well, she was an apostle to the apostles. Well, like constantly diluting and discrediting her role was because she was it. She was it. And again, like, is there any historical evidence that it was her spiritual leadership and not Jesus's? No. But who wrote the history books and the Bible? Who put the Bible together? And who has been the one constructing all of these things? Men. Men. Men in power, white men. And I think with where we are politically, socially, with most relationships, what we need right now is not some kind of like beloved Christ consciousness bullshit. What we need is the sovereign feminine, the feminine that is one to and of herself, the feminine that recalls all of her power, who is self-centered. So, if you want to join me in Mystics, Harlots, and Heretics, the price goes up at the end of the day on May 1st. This is energetically, it's somewhere between a course and a membership. Really, what it is a goddess temple. It's a space for you to spiritually anchor in twice a month with live calls where we're going to be learning about these different mystics, harlots, and heretics. So, Mary Magdalene, Veronica Franco, Isis, of course, goddesses, Isis, Lilith, Hecate, Aphrodite. We're going to be looking at different mystics, typically female Catholic saints who were mystics. So, Saint Therese of Lisieux is one of my favorites. And harlots, like I said, Veronica Franco, the Marquis de Paiva, women that throughout history lived on outside of the patriarchy in a way that granted them more power, wealth, and influence than other women of their time. We're going to be taking their wisdom. We're going to be taking their knowings, their transmissions, and we're going to learn about them, but we're also going to be doing somatic embodiment work to activate these transmissions from within. So we meet twice a month. There is a Telegram group where I answer questions weekly. We're going to have some guest experts coming in. Of course, there will be, I'm sure, other resources and content that I'll be giving you. But consider this like, again, your goddess church, your goddess temple. We don't have an organized central space to learn these things. So that's what I'm creating. So if you want to join me, the price goes up May 1st at midnight. The price doubles. So you're going to want to join before then. And if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll see you next time.